Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world.
Glad to be here for this one.
Yeah, today we are bringing you right into the geographic heart of our deep dive. I want you to just picture yourself in Central Florida for a second.
Oh, setting the scene. I like it.
Right. Specifically, we are standing on Main Street in the town of Celebration, and it's the 4th of July.
Peak Americana.
Exactly. The scene is practically tailor-made for a postcard. You've got this beautiful red brick road that just perfectly terminates at a pristine lakefront esplanade.
Everything looks perfectly planned.
Because it was. The streets are lined with these colonnaded storefronts topped by elegant white balconies. It's this compact, immaculate showpiece for small-town America.
Built by Disney, no less.
Exactly, built by Disney. And you're watching a parade go by. The mayor of Kissimmee is marching along. You've got military veterans, the daughters of the American Revolution.
And the Star Wars characters, right.
Oh, yeah, because we are right next to Walt Disney World, the absolute biggest crowd pleaser is this massive Star Wars float flanked by stormtroopers. The crowds are cheering. They've got starred and striped socks and bandanas. It just looks like a perfectly engineered American utopia.
It really does. And, it was designed to look exactly that way. It's actively tapping into a very specific cultural nostalgia.
Right.
But to see the reality of what we are examining today, you have to look past the parade.
Yeah. I want you to take your eyes off the street level. Just ignore the parade for a second and look up. Look at the upper floors of those beautiful downtown buildings.
The apartments above the shops.
Yes. Above the idyllic storefronts, the pastel surfaces are literally rotting.
It's a stark contrast.
It's jarring. If you look closely, you see bubbling stucco. You see broken tiles, patched and stained walls, rotting columns, cracked gutters everywhere.
Just layers of grime on what's supposed to be a pristine town.
And the inside is actually even worse. The residents of these buildings, they're living with small waterfalls in their units every single time there's a summer storm.
Which in Florida is every afternoon.
Right. Massive blooms of mold, vast termite colonies, sagging floors, wobbly stairways. This town, this place built by Disney to be an absolute aesthetic triumph, is decaying from the inside out.
It is.
And to be honest, when I first read about this, my immediate thought was like, who is the terrible landlord letting this happen? But it's so much bigger than one bad property manager, isn't it?
It is entirely bigger than that. And honestly, that's our mission in this deep dive. We really need to understand why this is happening.
Because it's not just a localized issue.
No, not at all. This decay is not some fairy tale curse where a spell has been cast over the town. What you are seeing, that physical rotting of the built environment, is the visible symptom of a massive intentional shift in how our society functions.
And we have a specific source guiding us today.
Yes. Today we are examining the book Sunbelt Blues, The Failure of American Housing by Andrew Ross.
Which is a fantastic read, by the way.
It is. But I want to be very clear for everyone listening right now, we're not here to just do a book review.
Right, that's not what we do here.
Exactly. We're using this text as an entry point to conduct a broad institutional analysis of the financialization of housing.
Okay, the financialization of housing, that's a heavy phrase. What does that actually mean in plain English?
Well, it means we are going to explore how homes have been mechanically converted from places of shelter and community infrastructure into globally traded rent-extracting assets.
From shelter to an asset.
Right. And we are going to use Osceola County and the Route 192 corridor in Central Florida as our primary case study to see exactly how the system operates on the ground.
Okay, let's unpack this because the structural design of this new housing landscape is completely fascinating. And it didn't just happen by accident.
Far from it.
To understand the rotting balconies in Celebration and really the broader housing crisis across the country, we have to go back to a specific catalyst. Where does this story actually begin?
The defining catalyst here is the 2008 housing crash.
The subprime mortgage crisis.
Exactly. That is the moment the architecture of this system fundamentally shifted. Now, we all know the broad strokes of 2008, right? Wall Street created toxic financial products based on predatory lending, the market collapsed, and the global economy took a massive hit.
Yeah, everybody remembers where they were when Lehman Brothers went down.
Right. But what is crucial for our analysis today is the immediate aftermath of that crash.
The response.
Yes. The government stepped in to bail out the large banks to prevent a total economic freeze. but they explicitly did not offer that same structural relief to the everyday homeowners.
The people who had been sold those predatory loans in the first place.
Exactly. They were left to face financial ruin.
Right. Millions of people lost their homes to foreclosure. You saw whole neighborhoods just completely hollowed out. But, I mean, those houses didn't just vanish into thin air. Somebody ended up with them.
And that somebody changed the housing landscape forever. The government basically auctioned off hundreds of thousands of these foreclosed homes. And the buyers were Wall Street private equity firms and real estate investment trusts, or REITs.
Let me stop you there for a second, because we hear terms like private equity and REITs thrown around on the news all the time.
It becomes white noise after a while.
It really does. And I think a lot of us just kind of nod along without fully grasping the actual mechanics. Can you explain what a REIT actually is? Like I'm 5 years old.
Absolutely. So imagine you want to invest in real estate, but you don't have the money to buy a whole apartment building.
Which most of us don't.
Right. And you certainly don't want to deal with fixing leaky toilets at 2 a.m.
Definitely not.
So a REIT is basically a giant company that pools money from thousands of investors. We're talking pension funds, retirement accounts, everyday stock traders.
Okay.
The company uses that massive pool of money to buy up huge amounts of real estate. Then they collect the rent from all those properties and pass the profits back to the investors as dividends.
Okay, so it's basically like buying a share of Apple stock, but instead of selling iPhones, the company's product is just hoarding houses and collecting rent.
Precisely. That's exactly it. In the wake of 2008, major banks suddenly stopped lending to everyday people who wanted to buy a home.
Because the credit markets were terrified.
Right. The banks tightened up everything. But those same banks eagerly provided massive lines of capital to these private equity firms and REITs.
Wow.
They essentially handed Wall Street a blank check to go to the courthouse steps and buy up these foreclosed homes in bulk.
Like buying wholesale.
Exactly. Between the crash and roughly 2019, we saw an estimated $220 billion of housing value transferred directly from former everyday homeowners to large corporate companies and financial funds.
$220 billion. That's a staggering transfer of wealth away from the middle class.
One of the largest wealth transfers in modern history.
And let me guess, they weren't just buying homes randomly, right? They had a specific strategy.
Very much so. They just specifically targeted Sunbelt areas.
Places like Central Florida.
Right. Central Florida, Phoenix, Atlanta. They chose these regions because they recognized the potential for rapid population growth driven by jobs and warmer weather.
Sure, people always want to move to the sunshine.
But there was another crucial factor. They combined that growth with environments of low regulatory friction.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning fewer tenant protection laws. It's much easier to operate as a corporate landlord in these states compared to somewhere like New York or California.
So instead of a family owning a home or even, a local landlord owning a few properties in the neighborhood, you suddenly have these distant financial institutions owning thousands upon thousands of homes in a single region.
Correct. Entire neighborhoods bought up by an LLC based in another state.
How does that change the dynamic of renting? Because let me just play devil's advocate for a second here. Isn't a highly funded corporate landlord maybe better than a sketchy local landlord who never fixes the plumbing? I mean, they have the capital to maintain things, right?
Well, in theory, yes, they have the capital. But the reality is that it shifts us from human landlords to what is essentially the automated landlord.
The automated landlord.
Right. If you rent from a local person, even a flawed one, there's a human being you could potentially negotiate with. Say you lose your job, or maybe rent is just getting too high for the local job market.
You can explain your situation.
Exactly. A local landlord is somewhat tethered to the local economy. But these new corporate portfolios, they're managed by algorithms.
Meaning the rent isn't set by a person looking at the neighborhood. It's set by a computer program maximizing a spreadsheet.
Exactly. The software does not see tenants as human beings facing inflation or stagnant wages.
It just sees numbers.
It views them strictly as predictable revenue streams.
Mm.
So the rental rates they set are entirely decoupled from local affordability.
They just detach completely.
Yes, they are completely detached from the actual wages people are earning in places like Central Florida. The rent is tied instead to the corporation's national profit models and the yield expectations of their global investors.
So if the computer says, hey, raise the rent, they just do it.
If the algorithm calculates that pushing rent up 15% will result in a few evictions but higher overall revenue across a 10,000 home portfolio, it pushes the rent up. period.
Man.
Ah,
And to really ground this in the geography we are examining, we need to look at the Route 192 corridor.
the heart of our case study.
Yeah. If you are listening to this and you have ever been to Disney World, you might have actually driven on this road without even realizing it. It is a 15-mile strip that sits right on the southern border of the Walt Disney World empire.
But it feels a world away.
Oh, it does not look like Disney at all. It is packed with tourist kitsch, budget motels, mini malls, cheap gift outlets shaped like giant oranges, dollar stores.
Classic Florida highway sprawl.
Exactly. And from what I understand from the sources, this specific road perfectly encapsulates the massive mismatch of this entire system.
It really does.
Yeah.
Route 192 is a landscape defined by an incredibly extreme ratio.
How so?
Well, you have an economic engine, the theme parks, the convention centers, that is built to attract roughly 75 million annual visitors.
75 million.
But the region itself only has about 2.5 million actual residents.
That is a wild ratio.
And because of that, the entire infrastructure, the zoning, the public spending, it is all architected to prioritize the visitor economy over the people who actually live there.
But the paradox there, and this is what really gets me, is that the people who live there are the ones making the entire engine run.
Without them, the whole thing stops.
Exactly. I saw this statistic in the research, and it absolutely blew my mind. Before the pandemic, there were 280,000 leisure, hospitality, and tourism workers in Central Florida.
That's massive.
That was 20% of the entire workforce.
Mm.
1 in 5 people. These are the people cleaning the hotel rooms, cooking the food, driving the resort shuttles, running the roller coasters.
They are absolutely essential.
If they don't show up, that 75 million visitor machine grinds to a halt immediately.
And yet, we have to ask, how are they compensated for being the backbone of that machine?
Probably not well.
Because the tourism industry relies on keeping labor costs as low as possible to maximize corporate profit margins, Central Florida has the lowest median wage of any major metro area in the entire United States.
Wow. Let that sink in for a second. The lowest median wage in the country, sitting right next to the most profitable tourist destination on Earth.
Think about that structural tension. You have an algorithmic housing market that is driving rents up based on national corporate yield targets,
Right.
colliding directly with a local labor market that is deliberately engineered to pay the absolute lowest median wages in the country.
It's a collision course.
The worker is caught squarely in the middle, structurally constrained from all sides. The system demands their labor, but the housing market refuses to accommodate their income.
So, to see exactly how these corporate incentives play out on the physical world, let's go back to that rotting town center in Celebration that we talked about at the beginning of the deep dive.
The perfect example.
Because it is the perfect, tragic illustration of this private equity playbook in action. So, Celebration was originally built by Disney in the 90s. And obviously, Disney had a vested interest in keeping it looking perfect because they were selling the dream of a master-planned community.
They needed the optics to be flawless.
But what happened next? Disney didn't keep it forever.
No, they didn't. In 2004, Disney decided to step back from managing the town, and they sold the entire downtown complex, so the commercial storefronts and the apartments above them, to a private equity investor,
Enter Wall Street.
specifically a firm called Lexington Capital. And this is where we see the financial mechanics literally strip the physical value out of the community.
So what did Lexington Capital do differently than Disney?
Well, consider the incentives. The CEO of this firm operated from an office on Madison Avenue in New York, 1,000 miles away.
He's not exactly walking the streets of Celebration every morning.
Exactly. He had no record of managing small-town centers, and more importantly, no vested interest in the long-term health or social fabric of the community. He simply applied the standard Wall Street extractive strategy.
Okay, break that down for me.
The key to understanding this is how they bought it. The purchase price for the town center was $21 million.
Okay.
But the firm didn't just wire $21 million of its own money from a bank account.
Right. They used leveraged debt. I read that they took out a $19.1 million loan for a $21 million purchase. Wait, hold on.
It's incredible math, isn't it?
If I try to buy a house, the bank grills me for weeks, demands 20% down, and checks every coffee I've bought for a year. How does a company pull off buying an entire town center with essentially less than 10% down?
Because it's a completely different tier of finance.
The rules are different.
Entirely different. Because commercial real estate generates income. Through rent, banks are willing to lend massive amounts of money based on the projected future income of the property. not just the underlying value of the bricks and mortar.
Oh, I see.
This is called heavily leveraged debt. They put very little of their own skin in the game.
Okay, so they buy the centerpiece of the town almost entirely with borrowed money. Now they have a huge mortgage to pay off. What's the playbook once they hold the keys?
The strategy is designed entirely around short-term yield. First, they dramatically hike the commercial rents on the businesses,
The restaurants, the bakeries.
all the
Ugh.
local shops. They extract the maximum amount of revenue possible to pay off their lenders and deliver those high-promised yields to their investors back in New York.
Squeeze the tenants.
But raising rent is only half the equation. To truly maximize that cash flow on the spreadsheet, you also have to cut costs. So they spent absolutely zero on maintenance.
Zero. On a town center in Florida where it rains torrential downpours every single summer afternoon.
Exactly. They just let the buildings rot. They let the water intrude into the stucco. They let the termites swarm the wood.
That is wild.
Because spending money on a new roof or structural upkeep lowers the short-term profit margin for that specific quarter. It's a calculated extraction.
But wait, this is where my logic kind of breaks down. If the buildings literally fall apart, doesn't the investor lose everything? Like if the balconies collapse and the town is condemned, doesn't the guy on Madison Avenue go bankrupt?
This is a crucial piece of the incentive architecture.
Yeah.
Shielding risk through limited liability.
Shielding risk.
Yes, the corporate structure is designed to completely externalize the risk.
Externalize the risk, meaning making it someone else's problem. How do they do that legally?
Through the use of shell companies.
Ah, of course.
The entity that actually owns the rotting buildings in Celebration isn't the parent company, Lexan Capital. It is a subsidiary of Shell Limited Liability Company, or LLC, created specifically and solely for this single purchase.
So it's essentially a disposable corporate wrapper.
Exactly. It's disposable. If the property rots to the point of being condemned, or if it faces massive lawsuits from injured tenants, or if it goes completely bankrupt, only that specific Shell subsidiary goes under.
The parent company is fine.
The parent private equity firm and its global investors are entirely shielded from that liability. They take all the extracted profit on the upside for years, pulling millions out of the town, and then push all the physical and financial risk downward onto the community and the local residents when it finally collapses.
That is infuriating. But I mean, mathematically brilliant if your only goal is extraction.
It's ruthlessly efficient.
And from the sources, it seems this incentive structure isn't just affecting commercial real estate or buying up foreclosed single-family rentals. It is fundamentally dictating what kind of new housing actually gets built.
That's a huge part of the problem.
We just talked about how Central Florida desperately needs affordable apartments for its massive service workforce. But if you are a major corporate home builder companies like Lennar or Polta Group, what are you actually incentivized to build?
You are definitely not incentivized to build affordable apartments. You are incentivized to build what Osceola County literally brands itself as.
Yeah.
The vacation home capital of the world.
The vacation home capital of the world. I mean, that sounds like a cheesy marketing slogan, but it's actually an economic destiny for the region.
The profit margins simply dictate the behavior. If you are a massive developer, there is immediate massive profit to be made in building 8 to 10 bedroom luxury vacation mansions.
8 bedrooms? Who is buying an 8-bedroom house? That's hotel.
Exactly. They aren't families looking for shelter. These aren't homes for people to live in. They are purpose-built investment vehicles.
So who buys them?
They are designed for out-of-state or international investors. An investor in Brazil or London or New York buys the mansion and then immediately puts it on a management platform to rent it out nightly to large tourist families visiting Disney.
Just a giant Airbnb.
Basically,
Yeah.
the builders are just following the capital. And because of that massive gravitational pull toward luxury short-term rentals, there is virtually zero incentive for the private market to build what urban planners call the missing middle.
Right, the missing middle. I've heard this term. This refers to the stuff between a single-family house and a massive high-rise, right?
Yeah.
Like duplexes, fourplexes, or smaller 1 to 2 bedroom apartment complexes.
Exactly.
The exact kind of housing that a line cook or a hotel maid actually needs to survive.
And the private market is hardwired by profit margins to ignore that missing middle and build these massive investment properties instead.
So it's a market failure.
Well, what makes it a true systemic issue is that the local policy environment mechanically enables and encourages this outcome. It's not just the free market acting alone.
How so? Because you'd think local politicians would want to house their own citizens. They need those votes, right?
You would think so, but let's look at the mechanical incentives for local government. Usually, local governments rely on impact fees charged to developers.
Impact fees, what are those?
When you build a new subdivision, you pay a fee that funds the public infrastructure required to support it, specifically things like new public schools.
Okay, that makes sense. More houses means more kids, means you need a new school.
Right. But in Osceola County, officials actively waived or significantly reduced those impact fees for developers who were building these massive vacation home rentals.
Wait, why would they waive the fees?
The mechanical rationale they used is that vacationers don't bring school children with them to enroll in the local district.
Oh.
Therefore, the argument goes, the developer shouldn't have to pay into the school fund. So it becomes mechanically cheaper for the developer to build a mega mansion for tourists than to build an apartment complex for locals.
Because the apartment complex for actual residents triggers the school impact fees.
Precisely.
That is wild. They are actively subsidizing the tourist housing over the resident housing. But surely the county makes money off all these tourists, right? Like, what about taxes? I've seen taxes on my hotel bills whenever I travel.
Yes. You're talking about the bed tax, formerly known as the Tourism Development Tax. This is a surcharge on short-term rentals and hotel rooms. And because Central Florida has 75 million visitors, this tax generates literal billions of dollars.
Okay, so if they have billions of dollars pouring in from this bed tax, why not just use that money to build the missing middle housing? Or build better transit so the workers can commute easier?
Because by Florida state law, that revenue is legally ring-fenced.
Ring-fenced. Meaning what?
It means it can only be reinvested into tourism marketing and tourism-related capital projects. Things like expanding convention centers or funding sports stadiums to attract more events.
Are you serious?
Yes, it is a completely closed loop. The billions generated by the tourist economy must be spent to advertise and expand the tourist economy.
So it just feeds itself.
Exactly. And by doing so, it deliberately starves local infrastructure, affordable housing, and social services of those exact funds.
So the system is working exactly as designed, but it's designed to completely ignore the worker.
Precisely. If we look at this impartially as an institutional mechanic, the policy environment is explicitly structured to subsidize and accelerate housing as a speculative commodity, while legally walling off the generated wealth from the local population that sustains the whole machine.
This brings us to a really profound structural shift in American society that the book highlights. We've talked about how this system transfers wealth away from communities and up to Wall Street. This feels like a massive pivot from the way we used to talk about housing in this country.
A generational pivot, really.
Yeah. The author contrasts this with what George W. Bush called the ownership society in the early 2000s. Now we are transitioning into what they call a rentership society.
The ownership society was a very specific cultural and economic narrative. It was the idea that the home was a private haven. It was the absolute cornerstone of the American dream and the primary vehicle for middle-class and working-class wealth accumulation. Now, we must acknowledge that this ideal was flawed and historically exclusionary for many marginalized groups. But structurally, that was the American ideal.
Right, the classic narrative. You buy a house, you pay off the mortgage over 30 years, and that equity is what you retire on or pass down to your kids. It's essentially forced savings.
Exactly. But post-2008, that ideal has been increasingly replaced by a reality of retail and extraction. The data is incredibly stark. Between 2010 and 2019, the number of renters in the United States grew twice as fast as the number of homeowners.
Twice as fast.
Yes. The concept of the home is fundamentally changing. It is no longer primarily a haven. For a massive growing segment of the population, it is a site of constant financial extraction by distant corporate entities.
Here's where it gets really interesting and frankly incredibly sobering, because we have talked a lot about the math on Wall Street, the algorithms, the policy loops. But what does this actually look like for a human being trying to survive in this system?
The human toll is heavy.
Let's look at the math for a real worker in Florida. Based on the data at the time of this analysis, Florida's minimum wage was $8.56 an hour.
Right.
For a worker making that wage, how much do they have to work to afford a standard two-bedroom apartment without becoming what economists call cost-burdened?
A worker would need to labor 114 hours a week.
114 hours a week. That is nearly 3 full-time jobs. There are only 168 hours in a week.
It is biologically impossible to sustain. You literally cannot sleep.
Right.
And because it is mathematically and biologically impossible, the structural outcome is that hundreds of thousands of working people are priced out of traditional housing entirely.
Which brings us right back to the Route 192 corridor.
Exactly. Because these workers are essential to the tourism engine, they have to clean the hotel rooms at 6 a.m., they have to live somewhere
I
nearby.
can't commute 3 hours.
No. And because they are priced out of the algorithmic apartment market, the default solution has become the extended stay motels that line the highway.
The motel trap. This is a deeply entrenched reality for so many people. And I think it's something a lot of folks who don't live in these tourist areas just don't see.
It's largely invisible to the tourist.
The book shares this heartbreaking anecdote of a couple, Melissa and Randy. Randy is a roofer doing back-breaking day labor in the booming construction industry. They are a working household, but they are trapped in a dilapidated motel room. And you read that and think, if he's working construction, why don't they just go rent a cheap apartment?
Because of the structural barriers of the rental market, it's not just about making the monthly rent payment. Let's say Randy does save enough for a month's rent. Because of their financial precarity, their credit score is likely damaged.
Sure, poverty damages credit.
And corporate landlords rely heavily on automated credit checks. When the algorithm sees bad credit, it automatically demands the first month's rent, the last month's rent, and sometimes 2 or 3 months of security deposit up front just to hand over the keys.
So if rent is $1,500, they might need $6,000 in cash just to move in.
Which is a classic poverty trap. They simply cannot assemble that kind of upfront capital. They are living paycheck to paycheck.
So what's the alternative?
So they are forced to pay nightly or weekly rates at the motel. And ironically, paying $70 a night at a motel ends up costing significantly more per month than a traditional apartment lease would.
So it is fundamentally more expensive to be poor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This system extracts a premium from the most vulnerable. And because they are living on that absolute razor's edge, drained of their resources every single week just to keep a motel roof over their head, any minor disruption is catastrophic.
Like a broken down car.
A broken down car, a twist of ankle, a bad cold. The author of the book returned to that specific motel a month later to check on Melissa and Randy, and they were gone. A neighbor said one of them had gotten badly sick.
When you have no safety net, an illness means you just disappear from the system. You get evicted from the motel and you fall into the woods.
Yes, the woods behind the tourist strip.
Yeah.
Which brings us to a really vital perspective in the book from a man named Rao.
The outreach worker.
Right. He is a homeless outreach worker
Mm.
who operates in those exact woods, trying to help the people who have fallen out of the motels.
What he observed was absolutely haunting to me. He notes that the trauma of living in the woods, the constant insecurity, the exposure to the elements, the fear of violence, the intense social stigma, it breaks people mentally before it breaks them physically.
It is a profound observation. The system pushes the most economically vulnerable people into these unseen spaces to hide them from the tourists.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Exactly. And the resulting psychological trauma creates an almost insurmountable barrier to ever re-entering the formal housing market, even if they were handed the money for a deposit today.
So we have these two completely different realities occupying the exact same geography.
What you are describing is the creation of bifurcated landscapes, parallel worlds existing right next to each other, deliberately kept separate by the system's design.
Paint that picture for us.
On one side of the 192 corridor, you have massive new developments like Magic Place. The developers literally dubbed it the Dubai of 192.
The Dubai of 192.
Wow. It is funded by high-rolling Brazilian investors. It features architectural designs by Pininfarina, the upscale Italian firm that designs Ferraris. They're promoting gourmet food halls, luxury amenities, and pristine aesthetics.
And literal minutes away, on the exact same road, sharing the exact same Florida sunshine, you have the rotting motels functioning as warehouses for the working poor who might literally be building or cleaning that Dubai of 192 development.
Exactly. And it is vital for you, the listener, to understand that this isn't just a quirky local problem of Central Florida. The cost-burdened reality we are discussing is a national structural condition.
Let's define that term really quickly. What does it actually mean to be officially cost-burdened?
The formal government definition of being cost-burdened is spending more than 30% of your pre-tax income on housing costs.
Okay, 30%.
And if you spend more than 50% of your income on rent, you are classified as severely cost-burdened.
Got it.
And the national data shows that half of all U.S. renters fall into the cost-burdened category.
Half of the entire renting population of the United States is handing over more than a third of their gross income just for shelter.
And as with all systemic issues, the impact is structurally disproportionate. Over 55% of Black renter households and 53% of Hispanic renter households are cost-burdened.
It's a massive drain.
It continuously drains wealth from these communities, further widening the racial wealth gap that the real estate system has historically perpetuated through redlining and other practices.
It's structural.
Entirely. If you look at the national data from the National Low-Income Housing Coalition, out of the 3,143 counties in the United States, there are only 145 where a full-time minimum wage worker can afford a basic one-bedroom apartment.
Wait, say that again?
Out of 3,143 counties, only 145 are affordable for a minimum wage worker.
So out of over 3,000 counties, a minimum wage worker can afford to live in 145 of them. The systemic failure is total.
It is, which leads directly to this massive phenomenon of hidden homelessness.
Right.
When most of us think of homelessness, we visualize someone sleeping on a park bench or in a tent on a sidewalk. But the reality is largely invisible. In the Tri-County Central Florida region, 1 in every 100 homeless children in the entire United States lives right there.
1% of the entire nation's homeless children in 3 counties, and they aren't on benches.
So they are cramped into single motel rooms with their entire families. They have no kitchen, so they are trying to cook on hot plates. They're trying to do their homework sitting on the floor between 2 beds.
Just scraping by.
And incredibly, because the system relies on these workers, these kids are attending public schools right in the middle of these wealthy tourist areas.
Like Celebration High.
Exactly. Schools like Celebration High, right near those rotting balconies we discussed, enroll some of the highest numbers of homeless students in the entire state.
It's an invisible crisis hiding in plain sight. And this goes even beyond the United States, doesn't it?
Well, we must zoom out even further because the financialization of housing is a global mechanism. Capital knows no borders. In 2014, the management consultancy McKinsey, which is hardly a radical organization, explicitly declared a global affordable housing crisis. The United Nations Special Rapporteur on Adequate Housing estimated that 1.6 billion people worldwide are inadequately housed.
1.6 billion, that's a huge chunk of humanity.
This isn't just an American phenomenon. It is the result of global capital seeking yield in real estate everywhere, from London to Berlin to Toronto to Orlando.
The same playbook everywhere.
Exactly. The UN rapporteurs actually took the unprecedented step of explicitly condemning Blackstone, one of the largest private equity groups in the world.
Really? The UN called them out specifically?
Yes. They stated that Blackstone's business model of buying up affordable housing and aggressively raising rents was fundamentally at odds with international human rights law regarding the right to shelter.
That is a major statement.
The systemic conversion of shelter into a financial asset is a global phenomenon.
Okay, so if the outcomes are this dire, if the UN is condemning it, if it's failing 1.6 billion people globally, and trapping workers in roach-infested motels locally, my biggest question is, how does the system persist? Why doesn't it collapse under its own weight or prompt massive political reform?
It persists because the system actively normalizes the extraction and vigorously protects its core economic engine. The local governance and law enforcement mechanisms operate specifically to maintain the status quo.
Give me an example of how law enforcement protects this system.
Take the motels on 192. The local sheriff's department often actively facilitates evictions from these motels, sometimes even when the legal grounds might be murky.
Why would they do that?
To ensure the property owners can quickly turn over rooms or remove undesirable tenants. But more importantly, the state power is utilized to keep the visibly homeless away from the tourist corridors.
Protecting the brand.
Exactly. The visual optics of the tourism economy must be protected at all costs. If families visiting Disney see the reality of the poverty required to run the park, it ruins the fantasy.
So they just hide them.
The system warehouses the working poor just out of sight, extracting their labor while aggressively denying them stable shelter, and uses law enforcement to maintain that boundary.
But surely people are trying to fix this. You constantly hear politicians or economists say that we just need to build more housing or raise wages. I mean, those sound like common sense fixes. Why aren't they working?
The book identifies this as the illusion of solutions. Within this specific incentive architecture, simple economic levers don't magically fix the system. They often get co-opted by it.
Give me an example.
Let's look at building more, specifically the policy of upzoning.
Upzoning, meaning changing the rules so you can build a tall apartment building where only single-family homes were allowed before.
Exactly. In a purely theoretical free market, increasing the supply of housing should lower prices. That's basic economics 101.
Right, supply and demand.
But we are not in a theoretical market. We are in a highly financialized market. When a city upzones an area, who actually has the capital to build there?
The massive corporation.
Right? Massive for-profit developers. They utilize the new zoning to build high-end luxury units because that yields the highest profit.
And what does that do to the neighborhood?
It immediately acts as a signal to global capital. It drives up land speculation in the surrounding area. Corporate landlords see the luxury building go up and realize they can raise the rents on the older buildings nearby.
Oh, wow.
So upzoning, in a financialized system, actually increases rents and displaces long-time residents.
What about raising wages or bringing in better jobs?
Let's look at the famous Amazon HQ2 example. A few years ago, Amazon announced it was bringing tens of thousands of highly paid tech jobs to Long Island City in New York and Arlington, Virginia.
Which sounds great on paper. High-paying jobs coming to town.
But look at the systemic reaction. The corporate announcement alone acted as a massive speculative signal. Real estate investors flooded into those areas, buying up property and instantly inflating local housing markets before a single new Amazon worker even arrived.
The market front-ran the jobs.
Exactly. Within this system, traditional economic levers are immediately absorbed by speculative capital.
This points to a deeper philosophical issue at the core of why the system persists. It's what the book calls the loss of the user. The author brings in the architect John F.C. Turner, who coined a really interesting concept, housing as a verb. What does that actually mean?
Turner's philosophy is profound. He argued that housing is not just an object, four walls and a roof. It is a process.
A process.
And that process works best when the dweller, the person who actually lives there, is actively involved in its creation and management. You build a community, you fix your porch, you know your neighbors.
Right, the act of dwelling is active.
But the current financialized system persists precisely because the dweller has been entirely removed from the design process.
They're just a consumer now.
Dwellers are treated as passive recipients of whatever the algorithmic market dictates. Or worse, they're simply viewed as data points on an asset manager's spreadsheet in New York.
Just a cell on Excel?
They are not active participants in community building. When you remove human agency from housing, you strip away the social fabric, leaving only the cold financial transaction.
So, what does this all mean? How do all these disparate parts, the Wall Street algorithms, the rotting balconies and celebration, the 114-hour work weeks, the tourism engine, how do they actually fit together into a single machine?
They fit together in very predictable, mathematically precise feedback loops. Let me explicitly map out the first major loop for you. We can call it the investor squeeze.
Okay, map it out.
It operates like a machine, step by step. It begins with massive investor demand for real estate, seeking high yields in a low interest rate environment.
Okay.
That influx of billions of dollars leads directly to price inflation for homes and land. As prices inflate, everyday people have reduced access to homeownership. They're simply priced out of bidding wars against cash-rich private equity firms.
Right, you can't outbid BlackRock.
Because they are priced out of owning, they are forced into the rental market. This expands the captive renter base.
Captive because they have literally nowhere else to go.
Exactly. Having a massive captive renter base allows corporate landlords to increase rent capture without fear of losing tenants. And it allows them to invent new ancillary fees, trash valets, processing fees, pet rents.
They just nickel and dime you.
That increased extraction generates stronger investor returns.
Yeah.
And what do stronger returns do?
They attract more investors.
They attract even more investor demand from global capital. The loop accelerates, constantly squeezing the dweller to benefit the investor.
And then there is a second loop, which we can call the tourism trap, and it operates right alongside the first one. You have continuous tourism growth, aiming for 75 million visitors.
Right.
That growth demands a massive service workforce to sustain it. But to maintain the high profit margins demanded by the global tourism industry, local wages are intentionally kept as low as possible.
Lowest median wage in the country.
Exactly. Those low wages directly lead to housing insecurity and a reliance on stopgap measures like the Route 192 motels. Living in those degraded, precarious conditions reduces the workers' bargaining power. You can't strike for better wages if missing one shift means your family sleeps in the woods.
You're completely trapped.
Because they are trapped and vulnerable, they're forced to continue accepting those low wages, which thereby ensures the continued dominance and profitability of the tourism-first development model. It is a perfectly closed loop of extraction.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, these local feedback loops in Central Florida are nested within much larger global systems.
Oh, so.
They are the local manifestation of asset management capitalism, where the basic necessities of human life like shelter are converted into yield-generating financial products.
It's treating homes like stocks.
Exactly. They are driven by the global flow anonymous capital moving through LLC shell companies, seeking safe harbors and physical assets. And culturally, they represent the collapse of the defining narrative of the American dream, the idea that hard work guarantees a stable home and a foundation for the future.
That narrative hasn't just faded, it has been structurally dismantled.
Dismantled piece by piece.
As we near the end of this deep dive, I want to ask you, the listener, a direct question. Based on everything we have mapped out today, from Wall Street to the woods of Route 192, what is the crisis in perception here?
The crisis in perception is fundamentally a failure to see the system for what it is.
We blame the individual.
Exactly. It is interpreting the housing collapse as a series of personal failures, looking at a family in a motel and thinking they just didn't work hard enough or make good choices. It is interpreting the crisis as a temporary economic disruption or a localized problem of supply and demand that the free market will eventually correct on its own.
But it won't.
That is the illusion. The structural reality is that this is the durable, intentional redesign of housing. It has been mechanically transformed into a financial instrument optimized for global extraction.
It's working as designed.
Yes. The emergence of the rentership society, the staggering wealth gap, the decay of the motels on Route 192, and even the rotting balconies of the luxury town centers, none of these are accidental glitches.
They are features.
They are the logical, highly predictable outputs of the system's underlying incentives. The machine is functioning exactly as it was designed to.
And that structural clarity is the vital takeaway. If we want to change the outcome, we cannot just tinker around the edges with minor policy tweaks or temporary subsidies. The system itself, the financialization of the fundamental human right to shelter, must be redesigned from the ground up to place the dweller back at the center of the process. Crisis in Perception examines how systems shape belief and how better tools help us see clearly. This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind Crisis in Perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon. For a shorter visual overview of this topic, see the mini explainer linked in the description. If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.